Space. Punctuation. Okay. From Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Okay. In writing, a space is a blank area that separates words, sentences, syllables, in symbolification, and other written or printed glyphs, characters. Conventions for spacing vary among languages, and in some languages, the spacing rules are complex. Inter-word spaces erase the reader's task of identifying words and avoid outright ambiguities such as now here versus nowhere. They also provide convenient guides for where a human or program may start new lines. Typesetting can use spaces of varying widths just as it can use graphic characters of varying widths. Unlike graphic characters, typeset spaces are commonly stretched in order to align text. The typewriter, on the other hand, typically has one width for all characters, including spaces. Following widespread acceptance of the typewriter, some typewriter conventions influenced typography and the design of printed works. Computer representation of text facilitates getting around mechanical and physical limitations, such as character widths, in at least two ways. Character encodings, such as Unicode, provide spaces of several widths, which are encoded using distinct numeric code points. For example, Unicode U plus 0020 is the normal space character, but U plus 00A0 adds the meaning that a new line should not be started there. While U plus 2003 represents a space with a fixed width of 1 em. I'll tell you what em means. An em is a unit in the field of typography equal to the currently specified point size. For example, 1 em in a 16-point typeface is 16 points. Therefore, the unit is the same for all typefaces at a given point space. Collectively, such characters are called white space characters. Formatting and drawing languages and software commonly provide much more flexibility in spacing. For example, SVG, PostScript, and countless other languages enable drawing characters at specific coordinates of X and Y, coordinates on a screen or page. By drawing each word at a specific starting coordinate, such programs need not draw spaces at all. This can lead to difficulties in extracting the correct text back out. Similarly, word processors can fully justify text, stretching inter-word spaces to make all lines the same length, as can mechanical linotype machines. I'll tell you what linotype means. The linotype machine is a line casting machine used in printing, which is manufactured and sold by the former Mergenthaler Linotype Company and related companies. It was a hot metal typesetting system that cast lines of metal typed for one-time use. Precision is limited by physical capabilities of output devices. Space, again, is Unicode U plus 0020 space. No, representations here of a regular space are replaced with no break space, if you're going to look on it on the website from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. You can see also U plus 00A0, no break space, which is and that and sign, ampersand, NBSP, semicolon, comma, ampersand, non-breaking space, semicolons. So let me go on. Use in natural languages between words. Modern English uses a space to separate words, but not all languages follow this practice. Spaces were not used to separate words in Latin until roughly 600 to 800 AD. Ancient Hebrew and Arabic did use spaces partly to compensate in clarity for the lack of vowels. The earliest Greek script also used inner puncts to divide words rather than spacing. although this practice was soon displaced by the scriptura continua. Word spacing was later used by Irish and Anglo-Saxon scribes, beginning after the creation of the Carolingian minuscule by Alcuin of Newark, and the scribes adoption of it. Spacing would become standard in Renaissance Italy and France, and then Byzantium by the end of the 16th century, even entering into the Slavic languages and Cyrillic in the 17th century, and only in modern times entering modern Sanskrit. CJK languages, and let me tell you what CJK languages are. The internationalization of CJK characters is a collective term for the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean languages, all of which include Chinese characters and derivatives in the writing systems, sometimes paired with other scripts. CJK characters do not use spaces when dealing with text containing mostly Chinese characters and kana. In Japanese, spaces may occasionally be used to separate people's family names from given names, to denote omitted particles, especially the topic particle wa, W-A, and for certain literary or artistic effects. Modern Korean, however, has spaces as an essential part of its writing system because of Western influence. Given the phonetic nature of the Hangul script that requires word dividers to avoid ambiguity, as opposed to Chinese characters, which are mostly very distinguishable from each other. In Korean, spaces are used to separate chunks of nouns and particles, adjectives, and verbs. For certain compounds or phrases, spaces may be used or not. For example, the phrase for Republic of Korea is usually spelled out without spaces rather than with spaces. Runic texts use either an interpunct-like or a colon-like punctuation mark to separate words. There are two Unicode characters dedicated for this: U plus 16 EB, runic single punctuation, and U plus 16 EC, runic multiple punctuation. Between sentences, main article, sentence, spacing. Languages with a Latin-derived alphabet have used various methods of sentence spacing since the advent of movable type in the 15th century. One space, sometimes called French spacing, QV, this is common convention in most countries that use the ISO basic Latin alphabet. For published and final written work, as well as digital World Wide Web media, web browsers usually do not differentiate between single and multiple spaces in source code when displaying text unless the text is given a whole space, CSS attribute. Without this being set, collapsing strings or spaces to a single space allow HTML source code to be spaced in a more machine-readable way at the expense of control over the spacing of the rendered page. Double space. English spacing. It is sometimes claimed that this convention stems from the use of the mono-spaced font on typewriters. However, instructions to use more spacing between sentences than words date back centuries, and two spaces on a typewriter was the closest approximation to typesetters' previously rules aimed at improving readability. Wider spacing continued to be used by both typesetters and typists until the Second World War, after which typesetters gradually transitioned to word spacing between sentences and published print, while typists continued the practice of using two spaces. One widened space, usually 1 1/3 to slightly less than twice as wide as a word space. This spacing was sometimes used in type setting before the 19th century. It was also used in other non-typewriter typesetting systems such as the linotype machine and the TEX system. Modern computer-based digital fonts can adjust the spacing after terminal punctuation as well, creating a space slightly wider than a standard word space. There has been some controversy regarding the proper amount of spacing between in typeset material. The elements of typographic style states that only a single word space is required for sentence spacing. Psychological studies suggest readers benefit from having two spaces after periods. Unit symbols and numbers. The International System of Units, SI, prescribes inserting a space between a number and a unit of measurement, the space being regarded as an implied multiplication sign, but never between a prefix and a base unit. A space or a multiplication dot should also be used between units and compound units. For example, 5.0 space cm, not 5.0 cm, or 5.0 space c space m, or 5.0 space cms, or 45 k space kg, not 45 kg, or 45 space k space g, or 45 kgs. So there you are. The only exception to this rule is the traditional symbolic notation of angles, degree, for example, 30 degrees. Minute of arc, for example, 22, this notation, inch maybe. And second of arc, for example, 8 inches, I guess, 22 feet, 8 inches. The SI also prescribes the unit of space, often typographically a thin space, as a thousands separator where required. Both the point and the comma are reserved as decimal makers. And that is 1 billion. 1 space 000 space 000 space 000 space 000. Or maybe that's quadrillion. Thin space, or let's see, 1 million, not 1 comma 000 comma 000, or 1.000.000. 1 space 000 space 000 space 000 space 000. 1 quadrillion, regular space, which is significantly wider. Sometimes a narrow non-breaking space or non-breaking space, respectively, is recommended, as in, for example, IEEE standards and IEC standards. To avoid the separation of units and values or parts of compound units due to automatic line wrap and word wrap. Encoding. Unicode defines many variants of a single white space character with various properties. Below is the encoding of the regular space. Character information, preview, space, Unicode name, space. Encoding's decimal hex. Unicode, the decimal is 32 for space. Its hex is U plus 0020. UTF-8, its decimal for space is 32. Its hex is 20. Numeric character reference, its decimal for space is ampersand, pound, 32, semicolon. Its hex for space is ampersand, pound, X, 20, semicolon. Note, the above representation of a regular space is replaced with a non-breaking space for visibility. In URLs, spaces are percent encoded with its ASCII or UTF-8 representation, percent 20. Types of spaces. The figure space. A figure space or numeric space is a typographic unit equal to the size of a single numerical digit. Its size can fluctuate somewhat depending on which font is being used. This is the preferred space to use in numbers. It has the same width as a digit and keeps the number together for various purposes. Non-breaking space. In word processing and digital typesetting, a non-breaking space, also called NBSP, required space, hard space, or fixed space, is a space character that prevents an automatic line break at its position. There's the parent space. The thin space. In typography, a thin space is a space character whose width is usually 1/5 or 1/6 of an EM. It is used to add a narrow space, such as between nested quotations marks, or to separate glyphs that interfere with one another. It is not as narrow as the hair space. The visible space. A white space character is a character data element that represents white space when text is rendered for display by computer. White space character, hair spaces, round dashes. A white space character is a character data element that represents white space when a text is rendered by a display or by a computer. Zero width space. This is the last thing on this page. The zero width space. It shows brackets and nothing in it. Abbreviated ZWSP is a non-printing character used in computerized typesetting to indicate word boundaries to text processing systems for scripts that do not use explicit spacing, or after characters that are not followed by a visible space, after which there may be a line break. Let me read that out to you. The zero width space, abbreviated ZWSP, is a non-printing character used in computerized typesetting to indicate word boundaries to text processing systems for scripts that do not use explicit spacing, or after characters not followed by a visible space, after which there may be a line break. There you go. See also EM typography, EN typography, and EN is a typographic unit, half of the width of an EM. By definition, it is equivalent to half of the body weight of the typeface. The EN is sometimes referred to as the nut to avoid confusion with similar sounding EN. Half width, and full width forms. In CJK computing, graphic computers are traditionally classed with full width and half width characters. Unlike monospace fonts, a half width character occupies half the width of a full width character. Now you know. Internal field separator. For many computer line interpreters, shell, of Unix operating systems, the input field separators or internal field separators, or IFS shell variable holds characters used to separate text and tokens. Now you know. Sentence spacing in digital media. Sentence spacing in digital media concerns the horizontal width of the space between sentences in computer and web-based media. Digital media allows sentence spacing variations not possible with the typewriter. Most digital fonts permit the use of variable space or a no-break space. underscore. An underscore or underline is a line drawn under a segment of text. In proofreading, underscoring is a convention that says set this text in italic type. Traditionally used on manuscript or type script as an instruction to the printer. It's used to add emphasis in modern finished documents. It goes on. And then there's the white space character. What is it again? Is a character data element that represents white space when a text is rendered on a display by a computer. There you go. All about the space.